How's it going?
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited you decided to join me tonight. I am very grateful for each and every one of you. And if you guys saw Andy's opener tweet, we are in fact adopting a puppy in just a few days, and I'm very excited about it. She's not a pit bull. She's part Aussie, part Australian Shepherd, part Shih Tzu, which I feel bad about saying on my family-friendly live stream. But she's going to be adorable. Her hair is very cute and very curly, almost like kinky, so tightly curled. I am so excited to meet her and get to know her, and we're going to go pick up a bunch of puppy supplies probably after this live stream tonight. That's going to be a lot of fun all by itself. I was going to try to see if I could find you guys a picture of her, but I don't think I have a good one. I just have these pictures where she looks like a little void, and I don't want to dox our pal who is giving us the puppy, so I won't show you the picture that he just sent us of her, but she is so cute and she's getting so big. I can't handle it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I foresee barking and yipping in the background while I'm recording in the future. We're supposed to be picking her up on Sunday, but we will see what happens. We are also starting to get a little bit of snowstormage going on here. Oh, let me change that back. That's not good. This is my better angle. There we go. Sorry, I'm trying to tweak the OBS studio and it's given me a hard time, but oh well, we'll get there eventually. Anyway, I am going to show you guys all the most pressing issues. We have great stories to talk about. The biggest news, I think, is that the New York Times is kind of starting to wake up to what's going on with schools. This comes out of a really unsettling case. It came actually out of Maryland, and it was a young girl. She was a girl who was trafficked. And then because they felt that they couldn't return her to her family home because they were afraid that I believe her adoptive parents wouldn't be accepting of her new gender, they placed her in a home where she was again trafficked and just constantly abused. And it's just one of the most heartbreaking stories this year. I know it's only January, and I expect to see more of this if people don't start to wake up to how big of a problem this is. But I will say that having seen this come out of the New York Times is actually really encouraging. Gives me a little bit of hope that the mainstream media will start to wake up. It's kind of the same feeling that I had when the Tavistock Centre in the UK shut down because they noticed that, quote, a lot of this transgender stuff was a phase. Sorry, that was where the quote should have gone. It was, quote, a phase, and that kids were constantly growing out of it. And in fact, I think one of the things they found was a lot of the kids who thought they were trans when they were young ultimately ended up being homosexual or straight and just fine altogether. And I've been seeing a lot going around lately about tomboy girls who act like they act like tomboys, act like little guys when they're teenagers, and then obviously grow up to become perfectly straight, perfectly heterosexual young ladies. And I know this is a factual occurrence because it literally happened to me. I remember when I was 12 or 13, I requested steel-toed boots, and I wore guys' carpenter jeans, and I wore very, very baggy t-shirts. I didn't think I could pull off hats, so I didn't wear any hats, but I was very much a tomboy at the time. Thank goodness my parents were extremely good, straight-laced conservatives and would never have given in to any kind of this nonsense. And I just thank my lucky stars every day that I was put in that household where they weren't going to try to turn me into something I wasn't, because I shudder at the idea of having ended up so terribly abused by this girl was by the system in Maryland. We're going to talk about the way schools view your kids, since this story is based around whether schools should be required to tell parents about this stuff. And we're also going to look at how even liberal parents are feeling ostracized by the way schools are treating them. We're going to look at the poor librarians who have to now remove books from their school libraries. We're going to look at Antifa's action in Atlanta and who one of the parents of one of the protesters is actually a very high-ranking Democrat. And in speaking of incompetence at high levels, it turns out the Biden Biden lawyers initially thought the official files went to the think tank only, so they weren't even aware that it was at other locations. We're going to talk about, in light of that, why nobody trusts the government. And we're also going to look at some of the context checks that Twitter has started putting out. And I also really kind of want to touch on, if we have time, this video of this gym lady who caused quite a stir because she posted a video of what she claimed was like borderline harassment or abuse, saying that this gentleman at the gym was going to go to jail for looking at a, quote, underage teenage girl, 21-year-old girl. Sorry, that makes more sense. So she turned off comments on her thread, and she is hiding replies from people who are calling her out on her BS. I'll call it what it is. It is, in fact, BS. And it's really wild. And it really is just a case of seriously toxic femininity. So we are going to get into all that. It is now 6:00 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you guys again for joining me. I am going to love tonight's show, and I hope you guys will too. And then pop on over to Timcast IRL at 8 p.m. That is going to be a good time as well, I hear. So let's get started with this from the New York Times. This is a little bit jarring the way they have it laid out. The title is "When Students Change Gender Identity and Parents Don't Know." Educators are facing wrenching new tensions over whether they should tell parents when students socially transition at school. So we're going to read through this article. I think we're going to try to read the whole thing. If we get to like 10 minutes and they show no signs of stopping, we'll just skip to the end like we like to do, because that, if it's well written, should give us like a summary of what they're getting at. So let's read. And we are going to talk about the Bradshaws, which is that horrible case. So let's get into it. Jessica Bradshaw found out that her 15-year-old identified as transgender at school after she glimpsed a homework assignment with an unfamiliar name scrawled at the top. When she asked about the name, the teenager acknowledged that at his request, he is a girl, for reference. I know it will get confusing, but here we go. Teachers and administrators at the high school in Southern California had for 6 months been letting them use the boys' bathroom and calling them by male pronouns. Mrs. Bradshaw was confused. Didn't the school need her permission, or at least need to tell her? It did not, a counselor later explained, because the student did not want the parents to know. District and state policies instructed the school to respect their wishes. There was never any word from anyone to let us know that on paper and in the classroom, our daughter was now our son, Mrs. Bradshaw said. The Bradshaws have been startled to find themselves at odds with the school over their right to know about and weigh in on such a major development in their child's life, a dispute that illustrates how school districts, which have long been a battleground in cultural conflicts over gender and sexuality, are now facing wrenching new tensions over how to accommodate transgender children. And I will like to punctuate this here by saying that if you can listen to this and not conclude that you should 100% homeschool your children or do everything in your power to keep them out of this system, I don't know what to tell you. I can't look at this and say in good faith that you should try to keep your kid in a school like this, because I don't think you can equip them to fight peer pressure with the degree of confidence that they need, especially not at such a tender and sensitive age. I know we all remember what it was like when we were teenagers. Not a good time. We were very unsure of ourselves. We weren't even sure how we fit in our own bodies. I vividly remember being like 14 or 15 years old and just feeling so intensely awkward and so ugly. And if someone had come up to me and said, "Hey, look how good guys have it. Those guys seem like they're having fun out there, right? Sure, they have acne, but at least they seem comfortable with how they fit into their own skin," I might have been persuaded to do things that cannot be undone. There was never any word. Okay, so the Bradshaws had been startled to find, the Bradshaws accepted their teenager's new gender identity, but not without trepidation, especially after asking for hormones and surgery. Doctors had previously diagnosed them as being on the autism spectrum, as well as with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, PTSD, and anxiety. They had struggled with loneliness during the pandemic, and to their parents, seemed to not know exactly who they were yet because they had repeatedly changed their name and sexual orientation. This is something that you see a lot in young girls. If you've read Irreversible Harm, I believe that's what it's called. I can never remember the title of this book. I believe it's Irreversible Harm by Abigail Schreier, which is about the transgender craze that is targeting young women. They're often on the spectrum, and this confusion manifests as a result of wanting to fit in with a peer group. They just want friends. I completely understand. It's a very hard time to be alive. It is. It's such a challenge to be like, okay, well, I'm in this weird, uncomfortable body and everything's changing around me and my hormones make me feel like the world is ending. Here's a way to fit in and have friends and be fighting the same battles together. And it's just very, very persuasive to young girls. Given those complexities, Mrs. Bradshaw said she resented the fact that the school had made her feel like a bad parent for wondering whether educators had put her teenager, a minor, on the path the school wasn't qualified to oversee. It felt like a parenting stab in the back from the school system, she said. It should have been a decision that we made as a family. The student, now 16, told the New York Times that the school had provided them with a space to be themselves that they otherwise lacked. They had tried to come out to their parents before, they said, but they didn't take it seriously, which is why they asked their school for privacy. This pronoun stuff is very confusing, but I will use the gender neutral they or them, even though that is also confusing in its own way. I'm not going to use the wrong pronouns for anyone. I don't care. This is a hill I'll die on, even if I have to keep correcting myself. I wish schools didn't have to hide it from parents or do it without parental permission, but it can be important, they said. This teenager, this person with the undeveloped brain, saying this is important. Schools are just trying to do its best to keep students safe and comfortable. When you're trans, you feel like you are in danger all the time. Even though my parents were accepting, I was still scared, and that's why the school didn't tell them. I understand being scared. I know it's hard, but you shouldn't be supported by a school system that is offering you ways to undercut your parents who actually truly do want what's best for you and who have known you since you were born and who in fact gave birth to you. Although the number of young people who identify as transgender in the United States remains small, it's nearly doubled in recent years. Oh, I wonder why. And schools have come under pressure to address the needs of these young people amid a polarized political environment where both sides warn that one wrong step could result in irreparable harm. Oh, goodness, and here's this child. Jessica Bradshaw, 16-year-old, flipping through their homework. I'm disappointed, but I trust that she wants the best for me, they said of their mother, who does not want them to get medical treatment yet. Yeah, for sure. The public school that Mrs. Bradshaw's child attends is one of many throughout the country that allows students to socially transition, that is, change their names, pronouns, or gender expression without parental consent. Districts have said they want parents to be involved, but must allow federal and in some cases state guidance meant to protect students from discrimination and violations of their privacy. Schools have pointed to research that shows that inclusive policies benefit all students, which is why some education experts advise schools to use students' preferred pronouns and names. Educators have also said they feel bound by their own morality to affirm students' gender identities, especially in cases where students don't feel safe coming out at home. But dozens of parents whose children have socially transitioned at school told The Times that they felt villainized by educators who seemed to think that they, not the parents, knew what was best for their children. In fact, we have an article about how even liberal parents are feeling this villainization. They insist that educators should not intervene without notifying parents unless there is evidence of physical abuse at home. Although some did not want their children to transition at all, others said they were open to it but felt schools forced the process to move too quickly and that they couldn't raise concerns without being cut out completely or having their home labeled unsafe. That is dangerous territory because when you get into the whole unsafe realm, you start to get child protective services lined up and ready to come knocking at your door. And I can't help viewing the trans issue as just another way that they will weaponize child protective services, so-called, to take children from parents who want to protect them and want what is best for them. This is a very dangerous territory for parents to navigate, and I completely understand their very serious concerns. Many advocates for LGBTQ youth counter that parents should stop scapegoating schools and instead ask themselves why they don't believe their children. We just heard from a mother who just said she wasn't unwilling to accept her child's choice. She just thought that the school pushed it too quickly. And Mrs. Bradshaw, who said she felt that was a decision that should be made by their family. Of course, I believe that she's correct. This is definitely a very personal choices that parents should be involved in. They said ensuring that schools provide enough support for transgender students is more crucial than ever given the rise of legislation that blocks their access to bathrooms, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what we're seeing here is targeted. It's like chiseling between parents and children in what appears to me to be a direct attempt to turn children into little social justice widgets divorced from their families. I don't know if you guys follow Libs of TikTok on Twitter, but there are many, many, many instances of LGBTQ advocates who are usually teachers telling their students and telling kids online that they will be their family. In fact, there was one from a gentleman named Jeffrey Marsh, who considers himself to be non-binary and who doesn't shave, but who chooses to use very bright, very bold eyeshadow and very, very poorly applied lipstick, because to him, presenting as female is just a joke, just a way to score your victim points. But he was saying that he is fully welcoming and inclusive of all children who are considering transitioning. And if that doesn't spell predator, I don't know what does. That's exactly what I think is happening here. I think this is the natural outcome of the Marxist way of thinking when children are being separated forcibly from their parents by activists who just want what's best for them. It's such a clear cloak. This is like when the Democrats present the whole, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act that did nothing to stop inflation and everything to shoehorn in insane progressive policies to preserve the environment. I'm using a lot of scare quotes tonight because this stuff raises my hackles. Incredibly uncomfortable to consider raising a family in this environment. These disputes are unfolding as Republicans rally around a parental rights, a catch-all term for the decisions parents make about their children's upbringing. Yes, parents have an obligation to raise their children according to their own values as best they can. Conservative legal groups have filed a growing number of lawsuits against school districts, accusing them of failing to involve parents in their children's education and mental health care. Good. Critics say groups like these have long worked to delegitimize public education and eradicate the rights of transgender people. Let's look at where the U.S. ranking education, rest of world. Let's see how American public education stacks up against others. Oh, would you look at that? BalanceMoney.com says U.S. education rankings are falling behind the rest of the world. Who knew? So it turns out that delegitimizing public education is actually really just looking at the way the education system operates and saying, hey, something's wrong over here. Maybe we should fix this. And this is literally just the scholastic stuff. Program for International Student Assessment tests 15-year-old students around the world and is administered by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. In 2018, when the test was last administered, the U.S. placed 11th out of 79 countries in science. It did much worse in math, ranking 30th. The U.S. scored 478 in math, below the OECD average of 489. That's well below the scores of the top 5, all of which were in Asia, Singapore, Macau, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan. China was not included in the rankings since only 4 provinces participated. I'm sure they would have scored very well too. In science, the U.S. scored at 502, above the average. The top 5 highest scorers were Singapore, Macau, Estonia, Japan, and Finland. When analyzing the U.S. results over the years, it's clear that the scores have been stable over time. While not declining, there aren't any signs of improvement either. In fact, there's been no detectable change in the U.S. students' math scores since 2003 or science scores since 2006. So they're just not making any kind of improvement at all. In fact, what we just read there was significantly more optimistic than a lot of ratings I've read about the U.S.'s math and science test scores. It's absolute nonsense. So I think we are going to scroll down a little bit to the end of this article just to see what their conclusion is. I see we get into the MX Mix Morales. Give me a break. This stuff is toxic. Anytime you guys see anything about this, you need to call it out, because this is the separation of parents from children, and turning these kids into just widgets to further social justice is absolutely morally abhorrent. All right, let's see. The child of Mrs. Bradshaw, the mother in Southern California, said they have empathy for parents who find it hard to accept their children are transgender, but expressed frustration. When parents say they need time or patience, it can feel kind of like an excuse for them to keep misgendering you. It feels like they are grieving for someone who is not dead, and it makes you feel like you're not good enough. Their mother reiterated that she loves her child no matter their gender, but voiced her own frustration. Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, Mom. Parents' views and emotions don't matter. The fact that this is their child, literally a combination of them and their spouse's DNA, doesn't matter. The state controls all, and the state will take this child from you if they think that you're not doing it right. That's exactly what happened in Canada with a father who misgendered his daughter. They removed her from his custody, and he's no longer able to see her. In fact, this is one of the things that we're seeing in Texas right now, of all states, with the James Younger case. Absolutely mental. The school is telling me that I have to jump on the bandwagon and be completely supportive, Mrs. Bradshaw said. There's only so much and so far that I'm willing to go right now, and I would hope that as a parent, that would be my decision. Of course, it should be her decision. But let's go on to see what the school board, in a different state this time, thinks about parents. New Jersey School Board's lawyer says parents cannot dictate what their children are taught. So not only can they not dictate how their child is addressed in school, they also have no say over what their children are taught, which is another great reason to homeschool your children. Even if you feel unprepared, even if you feel like you don't have time, you have to consider how important your children are to you and how important their well-being and their futures are to you too. A lawyer for a school board in New Jersey gave his interpretation of the law at a recent board meeting in which he said parents do not have a right to decide that curriculum schools teach their children. Well, it turns out they do, as we'll see in one of these next articles. In public schools, we have curriculum that is aligned with New Jersey's state learning standards. But please know, if your students attend these awesome schools, they're going to be instructed in this curriculum, which is consistent with state learning standards. That's not binding. If you choose to have your child attend elsewhere, that's your right. That's your right as a parent. Good. I'm glad he said that at least. Camegno's comments were made following parent criticisms of the district's transgender policy, Policy 5756, which is mandated by state law. The policy was adopted in 2016 and revised 3 years later. New Jersey law against discrimination, the district policy states, generally makes it unlawful for schools to subject individuals to differential treatment based on gender identity or expression. The policy also says the district shall accept a student's asserted gender identity and that parental consent is not required. This sounds like exactly like what they're doing over in California too. A student need not meet any threshold diagnosis or treatment requirement to have his or her gender identity recognized and respected by the school, district, or school staff members. In addition, a legal or court-ordered name change is not required. There is no affirmative duty for any school district staff member to notify a student's parent of the student's gender identity or expression. Yeah, no shock there. New Jersey is incredibly liberal as well. But here's what's happening. Even liberal parents feel oh my gosh, I can't read. Okay, one more time. Even liberal parents feel villainized by schools socially transitioning their kids without consent. An ACLU lawyer said parents don't have a right to demand schools inform them when socially transitioning their child. Both liberal and conservative parents say they felt villainized by their kids' school after educators socially transitioned their child's gender without their consent. Over 50 parents, including those who supported their child's new gender identity, sounded off to the New York Times over schools intentionally leaving parents over the discussion. So this is based on the article that we just read about. This just came out today. Although some didn't want their children to transition at all, others said they were open to it. The Biden administration has proposed changes to Title IX to include protections against sex-based discriminations that includes gender identity. This means schools would not have to notify parents before socially transitioning their child's gender, critics say. Both liberal and conservative parents raised concerns about schools leaving them out of such an important decision in their child's life. Of course, this is kind of rehashing what we were talking about earlier. But let's see. I wanted to talk about the case of this girl who was trafficked into Maryland. Let me see if I can find that. I think the Daily Wire is going to have information on that because they have all been talking about that recently. Let's see here. All right. They did not back down. They were suing the federal government over the mandates, so I'm glad that they succeeded. Okay, well, I'm not able to see that, but I want you all, your homework for the day is to go and find this story of this poor young girl who is trafficked, and she used the veil of transgenderism to escape her family and essentially run away, and then she was involuntarily trafficked by a pedophile to Maryland, and then when she was placed into a home, she was abused again, and when they were unwilling to return her to her family, she just kept getting abused. And it honestly is incredibly, incredibly infuriating to hear about. I'll probably tweet about this if and when I find that source, because that's a really big story, and I think people would do really well to recall that for sure. But speaking of school issues, finally we have a little bit of progress when it comes to school, and this comes from Florida, as all good things do recently. Some teachers removing classroom libraries to comply with new Florida rules, officials say. Pretty sure that they're not removing their whole libraries unless their whole libraries were stacked with nothing but CRT stuff. But let's read. I think I'm going to see if I can make this smaller. Go away. No, it's just an annoying local news site. For 5 hours Tuesday, Orange County Public Schools leaders discussed the consequence of new Florida Department of Education rules holding the district accountable if any pornography is found inside a classroom or library. So let me stop you right there. So they are losing their minds over having to take books out of their library because it's censorship. But the understanding is that you don't have to take books out of your library unless they're pornographic. Holy moly. The fact is that people are freaking out about not being able to show kids porn. Let's read on. The lengthy time devoted to that topic underscored the complexity of the situation. Excuse me. While state officials provided districts with the definition of pornography, they left everything else open for interpretation. At one point during a particular discussion about nudity, a staff member helpfully pointed out books about classical architecture that depicted the statue of David probably wouldn't be considered pornographic. However, that was the only clear-cut example given. That's the only example you need. Is it classic architecture? Yes? Okay, then there can be nudity. Done. Next. You could end up with a very different interpretation of what the author intended to do, Orange County School Board Chairwoman Teresa Jacobs said, exasperated. Well, I'm sorry she's exasperated, but it turns out that you probably shouldn't be showing children nude adults in any capacity other than classical architecture or art. The work sessions board members met over was intended to bring OCPS's policies into line with the new state standards, but was often sidetracked by different scenarios and circled back on itself. It sounds like a them problem. The meeting began with the announcement that the 3 books caught up in the previous school year's tidal wave effort by conservative groups to remove titles they found troublesome, Genderqueer, This Book is Gay, and Let's Talk, Teenage Guide to Sex, had been permanently removed from school shelves due to their graphic content, as they should have been. All of them were incredibly disgusting. I did not even feel comfortable with their content, and I'm a fully developed adult. Conversations about which books might be removed in the future and who got to decide which books to remove took up most of the morning and afternoon. It sounds like they were just venting their concerns about Florida's new parental rights bill, frequently and affectionately termed the, quote, don't say gay bill, but it is really literally about parents' rights to control what their children are taught, the exact opposite of what's happening in New Jersey. I have very serious concerns if this becomes a slippery slope, Maria Salamanca said. We do have members on both sides of the political spectrum that do want to censor based on their agenda. Officials revealed that teachers, particularly those in elementary schools, were required to catalog each book in their classroom library so parents and the school district may review and approve the list. Good! Officials revealed that, Board member Melissa Bird said some teachers were opting to remove their classroom libraries altogether instead of doing the extra work, a claim staff said they were also aware of. Okay, so teachers are choosing to make their lives a little bit less burdensome by just getting rid of all the books that their kids would be reading. Wow, that's a sign of a great teacher, is that they don't want your kid reading at all, rather than actually just take the porn out of their libraries. That's incredible. They're packing them up and our babies are not having access to all those books in their classroom because of this, she said to the distress of her fellow board members. No. This is because of lazy teachers who are unwilling to put in the extra work. So these people who only work 9 months out of the year can't even be bothered to make sure that their children are protected from actual pornographic content and are choosing instead to remove all the books from their classrooms. And parents are finding this incredibly upsetting. Oh, surely this couldn't possibly be the teacher's fault that this is happening. Staff members said the district was promoting a free app installed on school iPads to take much of the labor out of the process, but admitted the app wasn't perfect. They said classroom libraries were the individual decisions of each teacher. We're still struggling with the pandemic, and the thought a child doesn't have access to as many books concerns me. Board member Angie Gallo said, suggesting those classrooms be offered additional media time as compensation. Her fellow member, Karen Castor-Dental, asked if only parents of the students in the classroom could be able to challenge that individual class lists. Staff told her it could be anyone in the county. Oh, wow. We don't want to put restrictions on what other children read, she said. The concern spiraled into other matters as well. The school district's current policy states that if parents and staff members of one school decide a book is pornographic, all other schools must adhere to their finding. Again, good. This is exactly how this should operate. That led to Jacobs arguing that one particularly conservative or liberal-leaning group in a school may try to force their beliefs onto the entire district. Jacobs also wondered if the school would be responsible for books accessed through the public library system installed on school iPads. If so, she said the district would have to delete the software. Conservative-leaning board member Alicia Ferrant, who led the charge against some library books last year before winning her seat, said it was time for the district to get back to the fundamentals. Parents are here for reading, writing, and arithmetic, she said. This is just making sure that in our schools, kids don't have access to what some parents don't agree with. Ferrant argued that the district should draw lines in the sand and come up with scenarios and words that it would automatically disqualify books, such as levels of sexual content or a certain number of any curse words to remove uncertainty. Other board members responded by saying every parent's view was different and some children needed more mature books to deal with situations they may encounter in their personal lives. Board members and former teacher Vicki Elaine Felder kept arguing that the school board and parents were attempting to micromanage the professionals and stymie creativity in the classroom. Yeah, how many naked people do you need to show a 7-year-old before you've had your fill of creativity? That's absolutely nonsense. Please consider giving teachers the fact that they can make rational decisions about some of the books they're going to read, she said. Board members decided to meet with staff members individually and reconvene in a few weeks' time. Yeah, that sounds like the right choice. We have trusted teachers to make this decision, and they've made the wrong decisions consistently in a way that makes any person looking at this in good faith very suspicious of their actual motivations. So I think it's just perfect that they're doing this. I'm so glad. I hope this continues. This should be a conversation that they're having, and they should know that this is a very serious thing that they're going through with. This is leading to me not respecting the entire profession of teaching at all, which is very sad to me because teaching is actually something that I was very interested in doing when I was younger. Absolutely nonsense. Let's see what you guys are thinking of all this nonsense. Psychedelic intro time. Yes, this is Wake Up Waverly's super cool introduction that he made for us. Great new intro. Ayo, I'm digging the intro. Heck yeah, thanks Waverly. Wow, cool. It's like 90s awesomeness. Yes, that's me. I am 90s awesomeness. Oh, we got to fix that, John, says Andy. I'm not sure what he is referring to. Good evening/morning. Good evening, morning, John. Finally catching this live and on time. Woo! Congratulations. Thank you for joining us. Oh, the intro fade is jarring, says Andy. Okay, sorry to hear that. Congrats on the new doggo. Yay, puppies are awesome. Yes, new dog. It does sound fun. I am stoked. An Australian Shepherd joining the family. I approve. Yeah, I've actually had an Aussie when I was growing up, and she did not last for very long, unfortunately. That was truly heartbreaking, but she was awesome. Our new dog's name is SourPatchLids.me, or just Dot for short. Yes, so we'll have Dip and Dot. They will be a power couple. I'm excited. Clicker training is awesome for dogs. Yeah, we're really excited to train this dog just right from the very beginning. And we are going to be spending a lot of time with her since both Andy and I work from home. We're really in a perfect position to train her just right, and I'm excited. Why are you switching to that camera, babe? Thank you, dear. Yes, that was an accident. We clicker trained our corgi, and he's amazing and so well behaved. Oh, how exciting. Definitely got to grab a clicker for sure. Oh man, this story was brutal. Yeah. John says, good work with the cords, Andy. I am satisfied. Zach George's training for dogs on YouTube is also an awesome resource. We use that to train our dog to ring a bell when he wants to go outside. How wonderful. We should install a little bell by the back door so that Dot can ring it when she wants to go out. That's actually a really good idea and sounds honestly, truly adorable. Hi all. Instead of Lydia, we might have gotten Lyndon. That's right. I'm so glad that you ended up with Lydia and not Lyndon. Ugh, yuck. Lindell. Gross. No good. I was a tomboy. I liked hunting, fishing, etc. And I liked girly things. Yeah, for sure. Yep, it's tough. It's tough to be a gender non-conforming person in a world that wants to turn you into a transgender person and then try to fully transition you into a different gender. It's a terrifying place to be, and I honestly feel really bad for tomboys in this day and age. Somebody says she literally has an OnlyFans. I think you're referring to the lady we're going to talk about at the end of this show. Underage 21-year-old. What? Yeah. Crazy. She's a walking contradiction, and she is, I think she's a really, really good example of toxic femininity, and I think that's definitely something that needs to be discussed. We talk enough about toxic masculinity, and we never accept that femininity might actually be toxic too. Irreversible damage. Yes, thank you. These kids are being destroyed because their normal teenage confusion is being affirmed with catastrophic repercussions. Yeah, I feel bad. I feel really bad. That's the biggest scandal of this whole thing. A lot of people with autism are being taken advantage by the left who forces their ideas on them. Yeah. So autistic girls who are confused, girls who are lonely and awkward and scared. It's just crushing. Like, these are the most vulnerable people in society. And the left, of course, is using them to drive their own points. And it's just disgusting. It's infuriating. 3 years to become a teacher, many more years becoming a parent. Parent is way more qualified. I completely agree. Hello, solid monkey. It would be easier to protect the kids if the state didn't help kick out the dads. Yeah, so Thomas Sowell talks about how moms are incentivized to become single mothers because you can make more money taking government funds than you would from having dad in the home. It's honestly disgusting. Abolish the Department of fill in the blanks, says Andy. 100%. We should abolish the Department of Education. We should abolish the Department of everything. Fill in the blank. Abolish them all, for sure. Ron Swanson government. Yeah, that's the only super disappointing thing about Nick Offerman, who plays Ron Swanson on Parks and Recreation, is that he's actually a flaming liberal turd. So it's really, really kind of sad. But reality is often disappointing, unfortunately. I have full intentions of being present in my kids' schools. If for some reason I'm not homeschooling them, the teachers and other staff will be familiar with me. Good idea. Waffle Sensei says, hey gang, hello Waffles. Schools typing pseudo raise your kids. Yes, exactly. If super chats exceed $200 tonight, I'll launch my YouTube channel by Sunday, February 5th. You guys, we got to get Andy to launch his channel because you are going to really enjoy his whatever he decides to put up, whether it's skating or talking about technology, talking about programming or libertarianism. He is very skilled with all those things. He can write, he can draw, he can do math, all of this stuff he's incredibly skilled at, which makes me feel really comfortable about planning to homeschool our kids. He's going to be able to teach them all of that stuff. Poofy says, hello, thank you for the super chat. Poofy, appreciate you. Hi Lids, hi Andy, hi chat, love it. She says, launch it. Yes. I also hit the like button. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. We love Poofy. She's a good follow on Twitter for sure as well. I personally know a girl who was in perfect health and was manipulated through social media to think that she wasn't a girl. I got mad at her. I told her I loved her for the girl she was. Yes, that's a heartbreaking situation to be in. It's even harder for parents who then are concerned about the risk of having their children removed from their care. They're really good at selling medical transition as a cure for everything that brings you emotional pain. I've seen it happen to reasonable, intelligent people with a tendency to feel outgrouped. Yeah, that's Andy. Yep, for sure. It's crushing. It's really hard to watch. Hot take, toxic femininity is behind mass censorship, cancel culture, and trying not to offend people and affirming all this garbage. Of course, because femininity, when you put it in a political setting, is going to tend towards safety because men are so much more aggressively able to tackle all of this stuff, and they really want to. That's at the influence of testosterone. The influence of estrogen is that you want to protect, you want to keep safe, which also leads to open borders and all sorts of this crazy stuff that we're seeing now. And it shocks me that no one is talking about this stuff because this literally explains like 90% of our political issues. And the other part is men not being men. So it's just really the messing up of the genders. Andy says, "Oh, thanks, babe." It's true. Very, very good at everything. I'm very excited for my hyper-competent spouse to be teaching all of our kids all this important stuff. Andy, the libertarian hacker. There you go, babe. There's your title for your channel. Let's look at Antifa since we're talking about the left undermining everything we stand for. All right. Antifa and BLM riot in Atlanta damaging police and civilian property. That is correct. This was a huge mess. And the mainstream media, of course, right on cue, tried to describe it as a peaceful protest. I think they're going to talk about it in this article from AM Greatness, but we'll see. Far left domestic terrorists affiliated with the groups Antifa and Black Lives Matter went on a rampage through the city of Atlanta on Saturday, damaging property belonging to civilians and the police alike after an attempted cop killer was shot by police. Yeah, so this resulted from the death of one of their Antifa buddies, who was trying to murder a policeman, and he was shot and killed to the surprise of literally absolutely no one except perhaps maybe Antifa because they are not the brightest bulbs. Let's read on. According to the Washington Free Beacon, whom I love, the riots were sparked by an officer-involved shooting of Manuel Esteban Perez Terán on Wednesday. Terán was one of many anti-police protesters at the site of a new police training facility in Atlanta. When the protests turned violent, a 26-year-old drew a gun and shot a Georgia State Patrol trooper, with other officers returning fire and killing Terán. After his death, a far-left group called Scenes from the Atlanta Florist issued a demand for a night of rage, during which its members and associated groups were to commit reciprocal violence against the police and the population. What on earth did the population ever do to you? It doesn't matter. Antifa does not respond to reason. In the ensuing chaos, at least one police cruiser and 3 business storefronts were destroyed. Rioters threw rocks and fireworks, also targeting the Atlanta Police Foundation building. Chief Darren Shearbaum of the Atlanta Police Department later said in a statement that some rioters were even armed with explosives, which were used to destroy an Atlanta PD vehicle. Mayor Andre Dickens, Democrat of Georgia, later said that at least 6 rioters were arrested and that several of them were from outside the state. Governor Brian Kemp, Republican, issued a statement declaring that the crimes committed by the rioters will not be tolerated in Georgia and will be prosecuted fully. I believe they were also calling these people terrorists, and rightly so. These are politically motivated violent actors. The riots on Saturday mark the first major riot of its kind in the country since the infamous race riots of the summer of 2020, when the black nationalist group BLM and the anarcho-communist group Antifa committed mass acts of violence across the country after a black man named George Floyd died of a fentanyl overdose while in police custody in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Wow, it's a very concise, nice summary of the summer of 2020, the summer of love. Rioters in multiple states committed acts of arson, looting, vandalism, rape, and murder, ultimately resulting in over 25 civilians killed and over $2 billion in damage nationwide. And if I recall correctly, it was much more than 25 civilians. I thought it was closer to 40, but I'm not sure on that number. And I'm sure it probably varies. I just remember the case of the poor man who died in a fire and basically had to be identified by his dental records. Months later, he was found out. But this isn't the only trouble that was being caused across the U.S. House Minority Whip Catherine Clark's daughter arrested in Boston during Stop Cop City protest. This is from Fox 5 Atlanta digital team. The daughter, it's not actually a daughter. The daughter of the House Democratic whip was arrested during a protest Saturday night in Boston over the planned Atlanta police training facility. So even though this was happening in Georgia, there was a protest riot in Boston. In a statement on its website, the Boston Police Department said 23-year-old Riley Dowell was found defacing the Parkman Bandstand monument with the tags "No Cop City" and ACAB, while a group of activists protested in Boston Common. Dowell was later charged with assault after a police officer was injured while arresting them. Good, I'm glad they're not calling him a she. Clark, the House Democrat whip, said in a tweet that her daughter had been arrested. "Last night, my daughter was arrested in Boston, Massachusetts. I love Riley, and this is a very difficult time." Oh, hold on. Let's see if this loads. There we go. "This is a very difficult time in the cycle of joy and pain in parenting. This will be evaluated by the legal system, and I am confident in that process." And Chip chimes in, "You failed as a parent, but it's to be expected as you're a leftist." Oh my, harsh words. "Lost child, terrible mother. You should rethink what radical ideologies you've nurtured around your children that allowed at least one to become an alleged violent extremist. Judging by your past tweets, you've embraced trans radicalism." This other person comments, "Thought it was your son. Well, from frightened child with nightmares about climate change to violent criminal, great job, Mom." Yeah, so I guess Catherine Clark had tweeted in the past about how her child woke up screaming with a nightmare about climate change. So she's clearly been doing yeoman's work to inculcate these horrible ideas in her children, and this is the result. She's literally helped to put one of her children into jail. So good effing job, Mom. I don't know what else you would expect from a super ideological Democrat, but here we are. Clark has spoken publicly about the fears of her own non-binary child amid bigotry targeting transgender people. It's so crazy, isn't it, that a Democratic leader would have a non-binary child and be very concerned about bigotry. That's so surprising. It's almost like a vegan cat. It feels like you really know who's making the decisions here. Although, to be fair, her children are of the age of majority. Dowell was charged with assault by means of a dangerous weapon, destruction or injury to public property, and damage to property by graffiti. A second protester, identified as 27-year-old Andre Coletti of Brighton, Massachusetts, was also arrested an hour later and charged with damage to property by graffiti, destruction or injury of personal property, and resisting arrests. Okay, so resisting arrest I don't view as a really very legitimate reason to charge someone with anything because no one wants to be arrested. And at least these people weren't like blowing up cop cars. Although, threatening a cop with a weapon probably is not recommendable. Both arrests in Boston come the same night as a riot in downtown Atlanta over the death of a 26-year-old Manuel Esteban Paez-Terán, who was shot and killed by law enforcement officers trying to clear the site of a planned Atlanta area public safety training center opponents have dubbed Cop City. In Atlanta, police arrested 6 suspects Saturday evening. Only one of the suspects was a Georgia resident. Yeah. Most of these people came from out of state. It's absolute nonsense the way they get trafficked in or they bust themselves in. They come from far away. They have no interest in the community. They don't care at all what happens to any of these people. They don't care if the people are requesting more policing, if they are requesting help with crime reduction in their neighborhood. They don't care about the race of the people who need help. They don't care. They just want to be ideologically possessed in public and make a big splash and feel like they're revolutionaries. And the fact that this is in the leadership of our country is of no surprise at all to me, because where our leadership right now isn't incompetent, they appear to be actively evil. But this is a great segue. I'm so smooth. As in the case of Biden and his lawyers, they are just incompetent. So I will say that the silver lining here is that there's actually no scary man behind the curtain when it comes to the Biden administration. They are all just straight up incompetent. So let's read this article and then we'll coast on over to where nobody has any confidence at all in the American institution of government. From the New York Times, Biden lawyers initially thought official files went to a think tank only. So this is the Penn Biden Center in Washington, D.C. The mistaken premise helps explain why nearly 2 months elapsed. Okay, yeah, this is why. This is why nearly 2 months elapsed between finding those first files and the news coming out. It wasn't like an elaborate scheme by the Biden family and a lot of their friends to try and make sure that this didn't come out, that it was maintained low-key under the radar and that no one found out about it, as we learned from the Daily Mail the other day. The mistaken premise helps explain why nearly 2 months elapsed before Mr. Biden's lawyers searched the garage of his Delaware home for classified records. No, we know that the Bidens actively colluded to make sure that this didn't come out until after the election. President Biden's lawyers told the Justice Department in November that they had no reason to believe that copies of official records from his vice presidency had ended up anywhere beyond a think tank in Washington, where several classified documents had been found that month. 2 people familiar with the matter said on Sunday. So it is entirely possible that his lawyers were not in the loop on this because, again, as stated before, we know that his family was actively working to try to keep this under the radar. We're just going to scroll to the bottom and see what we come up with because we've just been kind of covering this as it goes. Even as Senator Richard J. Durbin, Dick Durbin, of Illinois, stressed that Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump had responded very differently to the discovery of classified material after they left office, he was also critical, calling the situation outrageous on CNN's State of the Union. He's correct, it is outrageous. I think this is the first time I've ever agreed with Dick Durbin on anything. It has diminished Mr. Biden's stature, even if it turns out to have been the fault of an aide, because the elected official bears ultimate responsibility, Mr. Durbin said. Yes, entirely correct. Yeah, entirely correct. And I'm glad that they ended with that note from Dick Durbin because it does seem like CNN and all of these other media outlets are starting to turn on Joe Biden. Let's see what this does to the public faith in the government. 2023 Edelman Trust Barometer reveals business is the only institution viewed as ethical and competent. Emerges as ethical force for good in a polarized world. There you go. Capitalism for the win. New York, January 15th. The 2023 Edelman Trust Barometer reveals that business is now viewed as the only global institution to be both competent and ethical. Yep. Business now holds a staggering 53-point lead over government in competence and is 30 points ahead on ethics. Wow, I'm surprised it's not like 70 points ahead on ethics. Its treatment of workers during the pandemic and return to work, along with a swift and decisive action of over 1,000 businesses to exit Russia after its invasion of Ukraine, helped fuel a 20-point jump on ethics over the past 3 years. Business, 62%, remains the most and only trusted institution globally. The increased perception of business as ethical brings with it higher than ever expectations of CEOs to be leading voice on societal issues, said Richard Edelman, CEO of Edelman. Yeah, I don't think that's a winning strategy because we know that those investments, ESG investments, are not winners. They're big losers. So I think if business wishes to maintain its edge as ethical and competent, then they really need to keep their head in the game and not stray into the utopian ideas of ESG. All right, so we've seen how fully incompetent the Biden administration is. Let's see what you guys are thinking about that. Andy, the libertarian hacker, ask for a copy of the teacher's syllabus or the state's curriculum documents and see what your state says kids should learn. We aren't all bad, I promise. I trust that not all teachers are bad, but I am concerned that there are enough of them that seem to be bent on the full-on indoctrination of children, and it really gives every teacher a bad look. It's not good. Really, really sad. I do think that parents should be fully involved. They should be on the school board. They should be calling their teachers probably once a week, and they should know everything that their child is being taught. And if anything comes across their radar that they don't agree with, but the problem there is that even if you do look at the curriculum, you have no way of knowing if your school that your child is at is socially transitioning your child to be a different gender entirely. And to me, that's incredibly disturbing. And I think that that's something that parents need to keep in mind. If they think that, oh, it'll be okay, they can just kind of keep on top of what a loosey-goosey teacher or school librarian might be telling or showing their child, there's no way of knowing. Like based on that New York Times article, we have no way of knowing what is being done with your child behind the scenes. Oh, Chris Bertman. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your super chat. Summer of Love Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, LFG. No, I hope not. I can't handle it. It's only January. Like, I'm genuinely surprised that they even had the wherewithal to go out when it's not summer. They say that rioting always gets worse in the summer because the weather is better. And Jordan Peterson has talked about how he prevents protesters at his lectures, and this is simply by going and giving his lectures at 8 o'clock in the morning, because these people are the bottom of the barrel. They are not truly dedicated to anything. They're genuinely lazy. They have no true driving force other than being, quote, revolutionaries and anti-fascist. Adam says, loved you on Timcast IRL and followed you over here. Thank you very much for joining us over here. We have a great time over here. We start off your evening with all the stories that Timcast IRL probably later goes on to cover. Johnny says, I know you aren't all bad teachers, that is, as both my parents are teachers, lol, but where I live, society isn't as frequently asked questions, isn't as infected with the liberal mind virus yet. Eric says, great show. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Andy says, I think one of my first videos will be all about the tragic butchering of the word hacker by the mainstream media in the late 80s, early 90s, and why it's worth resurrecting its original meaning. That would be great, because I don't think most people know that hacker was not originally meant to be negative. It actually had a very concentrated smear campaign focused on it, and hasn't really recovered from it. Solid Monkey says, so is this the winter of love? Oh, I hope not. I hope this is a one-off thing, but unfortunately it is unseasonably warm this winter, I guess, so this could be more of the problem. Wonder what the NFL would have done since they chose Atlanta to host a playoff game if the Bills and Chiefs were to play. I'm not sure. Kanye Ron says, isn't Riley a male? Yeah, so Riley is a relatively neutral name. I guess that's not their born name. I don't really care, not really invested in this person at all, but I will use their proper pronouns that they were born with until, probably until I die, because I don't like the idea of using inappropriate pronouns. Chris says, LOL, these people are horrible. Yes, correct. That's fair analysis. I could probably have condensed all of my words into just those ones there. And Greg says, Andy, I would love that to be your first video. You guys are honestly going to love Andy's channel. I don't see him having a problem growing it at all. I don't trust the businesses that cave to the woke agenda. Yeah, I don't either. But most people in general view them as more ethical than the government, which surprises me not at all. No surprise there. Andy says they're not sending their best. Not at all. KC says, just be heavy-handed when protecting your children. Fear is a strong tool. I agree. But even when I was being homeschooled back in late 90s, early 2000s, my mom was very concerned that someone would call Child Protective Services on us. And I completely understand why. It turns out that my super conservative straight-laced parents were right about almost everything. They did go a little overboard. For example, they thought that Harry Potter was really, really bad. And in fact, now it turns out that the author of Harry Potter is really, really good and a really strong ally as we're trying to fight a lot of this gender critical stuff. Norm MacDonald said the teachers are the real heroes. Well, if you would like to agree with Norm MacDonald, you are welcome to do so. The men at Normandy said, gee, I wish some teachers were here. That's exactly what they said. How did you know? That's crazy. I believe that to be entirely correct. Hell yeah, it's great. We get to hear all the good scoops from you starting at 6, then can catch Timcast at 8. Always appreciate getting your insights and scoops. Thank you very much. I'm very glad that you're here. I like to try to scoop all these shows, and I find that they often talk about what I talked about the night before, the next day on the Daily Wire. I didn't really get into the gym lady thing because I didn't have a lot of time the other night, and it looks like we're actually going to run out of time here in just a minute anyway. I think we're going to let's talk about that instead of the context added on Twitter. That was a really interesting story too, because everybody's getting context added up to and including Joe effing Biden. So Joe Biden got it. Let me show you this one from the AP and then we'll move right over to this gym lady thing. The Associated Press says one of Sarah Huckabee Sanders' first acts as Arkansas governor was to ban most state agencies from using the gender-neutral term Latinx, tapping into a debate that's divided Hispanics along generational lines. Now, before we read this, you guys know what's wrong with this, right? This is not divided along generational lines. Literally the only Hispanic people who are comfortable with using the term Latinx are college educated, typically young women. That's not generational. That's a matter of education. And it's a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of a percent who are okay with this term at all. And they are all young college educated women because higher education is truly lost. So the added context here, readers added context they thought people might want to know. Article's headline puts an impression that this is a highly debated issue for Hispanics. Polls going back to 2019 to present have shown that Hispanics overwhelmingly reject the use of the term Latinx. And then they offer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 articles. And I find that to be incredibly helpful because I think most people looking at this headline would not have known that. Rita Panahi says, just here for the ratio, you lying cretin X. I love that. Christina Pushaw from Florida says this debate has not divided Hispanics in any way. Every opinion poll shows that 95 to 99% of Hispanics do not use the fake term Latinx. Either they have never heard of it or they know about it and are understandably find it offensive as it is a perversion of the Spanish language. Jason Rance says, I love that this nonsense is being fact-checked now. It's true. It's incredibly, incredibly refreshing to see this also being fact-checked. This from Robert Reich, who's supposedly an economics professor at Berkeley. Egg prices are up 60%. That's absurd. People are paying upwards of $6 and $7 for a dozen eggs. Why? Corporate greed. Cal Maine, the largest egg producer in the U.S., is raking record profits, $198 million in its latest quarter. That's a 65% increase from a year ago. Readers added context they thought you might want to know. This one says egg prices are up 60%. Oh no, I'm just rereading his tweet. Excuse me. Egg prices are up because of an ongoing wave of avian influenza has killed 29%. That's 1/3 of U.S. egg-laying birds. And they give a link from the USDA, which you would think Democrats would fully appreciate, but I'm sure they do not because this interferes with the rhetoric surrounding corporate greed. They're kind of fighting a losing battle with this one because, as we just read, people view business as highly ethical, much more so than the government. And Robert Reich used to be a government official, former Secretary of Labor, Berkeley professor. I think he teaches like public policy and economics over at Berkeley. And I will point out that he is 76 years old, as you can see from this video, and he is also less than 5 feet, so he is a tiny little man shrinking and turning into a corn cob, if you are familiar with that viral tweet. So now this brings us to our delightful gym lady, and this is part of the reason that I do not like going to gyms like this. Let's read her tweet. This guy kept making me extremely uncomfortable at the gym. This is why I'll end up crying on stream because I feel so grossed out at times with the amount of sexualization I experience. Oh, he just glanced at her. Oh, he glanced at her again 5 times. Why is he walking over? Oh my gosh. Hopefully this spreads awareness for girls who experience this type of treatment at the gym. What type of treatment? He looked in your direction. You counted a total of like 5 times. I'm going to do it. I'm going to slut shame her because I don't understand what happened to girls to make them think that this attire was appropriate in the gym. Never in my life have I considered that this is the right thing to wear. She literally looks like she's wearing her underwear to work out in. And then she's not in good faith asking why guys are looking at her. I don't understand the thinking here. I would say she's mentally deficit if it wasn't quite clear to me that she's morally deficit. And let's look at why. Who can reply? People Jessica FRNDZ follows or mention can reply. So no one can reply because she didn't follow or mention anyone in this story. Staring at the gym is 100% normal. It annoys me, but what are people supposed to look at? The floors? Walking up and grabbing the weight, now that's not normal. Okay, so I guess he came over and was offering to help her put her bar back on. I've seen a woman in the gym once drop the bar on the bench press on her neck. Ever since, I always look out for women in the gym. Not in a creeping stare, but I'd hate to see something like what happened to that poor woman happen again. There's creeps, sure, but not all of us are. And someone else commented, he didn't approach you. I don't want to read the rest of her explanation because she takes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tweets to explain herself because she's getting royally ratioed. Look at these retweets to likes. This is insane. Another common L, making a regular dude looking around in between sets, and you are making him out to be a weirdo. Honestly, he looked around at the gym normally, sometimes in your direction. He offered to help put weights on as he walked past and respected your wishes. Then you said, it's okay, thank you. This is literally a direct transcript. Also, you cut the clip so more people click on your TikTok so you get more views. You are crazy. She's not crazy. She's very calculated. And I think it's giving her a way out to say that she's mentally damaged because she's not. She knows exactly what she's doing. This is all for likes. This is all for clout. Look at this face. Look. Little smirk. Little wiggle. No, she knows exactly what she's doing. She's incredibly calculating. She's trying to ruin someone's life for the crime of being at the gym at the same time as her. This is toxic femininity. This is the level of narcissism that I can't handle. If anyone looks in my direction, they're clearly looking at me. And because I'm in feminist mindset, they're looking at me to objectify me. That is disgusting. It is not true. I will not tell you how freeing, I cannot tell you how freeing it is to realize one day that people don't think about you at all. They don't think about you at all. They're barely looking at you. They are concerned with themselves. This is what keeps them from tripping all over the place when they're out walking. This is what keeps them from forgetting their car keys. They are focused on themselves, especially in the gym. Except in the gym, you have to kind of work together so that you can work on the machines at different times. You have to kind of agree that I'll use the barbell at this time, you use it at this time. I'll use the bar, I'll use the bench, whatever needs to happen can happen. And it is a kind of teamwork. She's gotten 2 million interactions on this and only 174 likes. And she hid comments that were questioning of her. And this is how you know. So I commented this about Bishop Talbert Swan, who said something verifiably untrue. And instead of changing what he said, rule of thumb, dishonest people can be spotted by a refusal to delete disproven tweets. They just restrict and hide responses because that's exactly what Talbert Swan was doing. He said if a 6-year-old black boy packed his mother's gun in his backpack, went to school, and deliberately shot a white teacher, they would have arrested his mother, father, sisters, and brothers, aunts and uncles, distant cousins, and neighbors by now. What he apparently didn't understand, because he can't read the news, was that the boy in this instant he was referring to literally was black. And he shot his white teacher. Here's Freckled Liberty saying, that's literally what happened, yet here you are defending him. We see through your lies, you disgusting race baiter. Shame on you for being a false prophet and leading people astray. You'll be judged harshly for being a man who professes truth out of one side of his mouth while sowing lies and deceit with the other. So that's why they stopped talking about it. Interesting. It is why they stopped talking about it, because he was a little black boy. Virginia boy who shot teacher Abigail Werner told another he wanted to set her on fire, said report. This is the boy in question. And this shouldn't even be a question of race. This was a horrible event. It never should have happened. He was a 6-year-old boy who never should have had access to this weapon. But he did. Careless parents who should certainly be charged for this. But the fact of the matter is that Talbert Swan thought it was more important to make hay on the race card than to recognize the facts of the matter. And this is very similar to what our gym friend is doing. Here are his hidden replies. Everybody just throwing this article at him. Insane. So let's look at her hidden replies. Let's go back about 3 clicks. Here we go. All right. So here we have frowning face. They're tagging in the Joey Swole, who they know will give her a hard time. Bro, he just looked. I swear you people need a grip on reality. You put him on blast for him just looking at you. Oh, God forbid his eyes land on you, WTF. Putting the man on blast for looking in your direction when you know this can hurt him is so disgusting. Suggesting he's sexualizing you just because he looked over 3 times is a reach, and you should follow your own advice and mind your own business. Gross post. LMFAO, you're delusional. He's going to jail for staring at an underage 21-year-old. The fact that she said he's going to jail proves that she is out to get him. The world revolves around her. She will have her revenge on anyone in her vicinity. You cannot be an underage 21-year-old, and no one will go to jail ever for looking at someone. Oh my gosh. Let's see if we can find the link to her OnlyFans. She has an OnlyFans. She has a TikTok. She is not afraid of being sexualized. She is acting in bad faith. She is, for lack of a better word, a predator. To try to take this out on someone who is just looking at you because you're recording, she's talking to herself, she's mumbling under her breath. She looks insane. The fact that she is so shocked that someone looked at her when she was doing all this off in her own little corner of the gym is just, and that little smirk, that little wiggle is disgusting to me. I have no time for this. This is what Jordan Peterson is talking about when he says that women need to hold their crazy female counterparts accountable because men can't do it. Women need to call this out relentlessly. We need cultural enforcement against this type of insanity. But again, I won't call it insanity. This is weaponized femininity, because the fact that she's wearing a sports bra and what's basically like boxer briefs in the gym should be a red flag already. She wants the attention. She wants it. She lives for it. She makes money off it. Literally making money off this stuff. Oh, saying, oh, I don't want to be sexualized. This is terrible. I could never. She has an OnlyFans. She's got a TikTok. She lives for the clicks and likes. This is literally probably how she earns her money. And gross. 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 Toxic femininity. If you see this in the wild, call it out. Call it out. Tell a woman who's doing this at the gym that you don't think that's appropriate, and lobby the owners of gyms to ban people who do this from their establishments, because someone is going to get in serious legal trouble over this, and it probably won't be the poor defenseless little lady. The poor woman who is just trying to work out. Oh, she's trying to live stream it, and she was trying to make money off some man's discomfort. Absolutely repulsive. Moral error, worse than an error, because she's being fully intentional about it. Anyway, I just wanted to vent about that. I know we really didn't have time for that because we're already over a little bit, but I just wanted to rant about it. So there you go. They certainly are not sending their best. I'm applying that to this instance as well. I mean, JK is based on the trans stuff. She is, and we need all the allies we can get. But she's still very liberal on literally everything else. Yes, I often say that the reason she's in this position at all, and the reason that people are threatening to kill her, is because of the ideas that she helped sow. So I don't really feel that she's a perfect ally, but she's certainly better than nothing. For some reason, my super chat didn't show up. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can go back. Let me see if I can find, oh no, I only see 2. I see one from Poofy and one from Chris Bertman. So hopefully they didn't take your money and then not let your super chat show up. I'm very sorry about that. Let's see here. Grow your own chickens if you can, TBH. Great advice. That will help fight the cost of eggs. I know they're very expensive. Andy and I today went in and looked for the cheapest ones, and we actually found a dozen that was probably about $4.50. That was good. They hate us. Latinx is, I don't care what you are Latinx. Yes, they are literally trying to deconstruct your language while telling you that they're being culturally sensitive. It's honestly really quite the interesting sleight of hand to see how they try to wrangle that one, because they are literally trying to tell you that they're your savior while deconstructing your own centuries-old language. Absolutely ridiculous. Robert Third Reich. Yes, I know. His last name is Reich. It's ridiculous. My super chat got refunded, FYI. I'm very sorry to hear that. You should try to resend it. We'll see if we can see it before the end of the show in just a few minutes. Johnny says, with homegrown stuff, at least you know what you're eating for the most part, with hormones, antibiotics and stuff. Yeah, 100%. So when I was losing weight, one of the things that I found was entirely helpful was making everything yourself. You just don't eat out. You don't order in. You make sure that you know exactly what goes into your food. And people are talking a lot about seed oil. I will tell you right now that I don't think it's entirely seed oil. I think it's a combination of seed oil and sugar. And I think it's the fact that they removed all the natural animal fats from everything in the attempt to be low fat. I follow a lot of keto people on Instagram, even though I'm not strictly keto. I'm just like carb conscious, low carb. And one of the guys that I follow just walked into the grocery stores and he's like, look what you can get. There's like, Little Debbie's cereal and ice cream and all this stuff and all this instant stuff and everything like that you can eat will have seed oils in it, and it will likely also have sugar. So I think that itself is the deadly combination. Psycho Clown says 100% with you. You just rolled a 20 lids. Thank you. I don't know what that's in reference to. Oh yeah, hopefully my ladies rant. But yeah, I don't have patience for that kind of stuff. I hate the kind of person who looks to try to make someone else the target of their narcissism. That is toxic. That's a character flaw that we're seeing more and more. The world does not revolve around you. You need to consider that other human lives have value too. And I just tend to think that everything can be traced back to the fact that we don't appreciate the value of human life. Because you guys know that I'm like rabidly pro-life, and I do believe that each life is important and significant. And I think when you take that away from your underlying stack of philosophical cards, you're going to be left with, for example, this lady who views this man as completely disposable. She does not care if he goes to jail merely for being in the same vicinity as her. And I hope that she is banned from this gym entirely. I will be looking for that news story moving forward because that's very important to my personal psyche. And why that exercise? Exactly. This exercise is carefully calculated. I've seen a lot of gym ladies do this exercise. I've seen guys do it a little bit as well, but I've seen it a lot. And it's a very, very hypersexualized move that is calculated to get those likes and views wherever she's streaming. I think she's a TikTok, she's not a TikTok streamer. She's a Twitch streamer. That's where she's sending all this stuff. So she's literally monetizing on her physical appearance and on this exercise she's doing. It's literally like a light version of pornography, much as I hate to say it. I think that anybody should be able to go to the gym and do whatever workout they want to do, but the fact of the matter is that she dressed the way she did. She chose to weaponize this battleground of just being at the gym alongside her. This poor guy just trying to get his sweat on. He's wearing like a normal t-shirt like I would expect anyone to wear to the gym. She's literally wearing what's essentially her underwear. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm just trying to work out. People are sexualizing me. I can't imagine anything like this happening. Anyway, I digress. I've already said all that. Somebody says, why not triceps? That's a great question. She's 100% overconfident in her appearance and overall desirability. Yes, she's extremely mid, but that little smug smirk and that wiggle tell me that she's not aware of this at all. Barbell hip thrusts work out the glutes. Yeah, so she's trying to get a big butt. This is everything she's doing is for sexuality. And then she's like, oh my gosh, why am I being sexualized? That's crazy. Modern Western women generally have way too high an opinion of themselves. This is coming from a modern Western woman. I am inclined to agree. Yes, this is also coming from a modern Western woman. I completely agree. You know, if you comment that on Instagram, your comment will be immediately removed and you'll be given a warning. I know this because I've done it and they don't like it at all, but you can say the exact same thing about men. Swap the gender and you're good to go. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I use a stair climber and a rowing machine to work my glutes. I rock hard. There you go. Yep, there are a lot. You can do squats, and that's fine. That's a great way to exercise. And you don't have to wear what's functionally your underwear to the gym. You could wear something loose-fitting and flowing. It's kind of annoying if you're trying to do moves like a downward dog. If you're like trying to do yoga, you can wear something slightly more form-fitting, but never have I ever gone to work out in anything that even remotely resembles underwear. I have always worn those 7/8 leggings. I usually wear a short sleeve t-shirt or a tank top underneath a jacket because I don't believe in being immodest and I'm not there to show off. I'm there to work out. The point of working out is not to look attractive. If anything, it's to look incredibly unattractive because you're sweating to get to a point where you feel confident in your body and where you've trained your muscles and are comfortable with your physicality and can then dress sexily, wear whatever swimsuit or whatever you want to wear. Oh, goodness. I didn't know that Lids streams. I do. Thank you for joining us, Stevie. I appreciate that. John says, she's bait waiting for prey. I think that's entirely correct. Stevie says, I'm a nobody and Lids was randomly really nice to me on Twitter and I have liked her ever since. I'm glad because I'm often, unfortunately, too salty on Twitter. I'm glad that in your instance, I was nice to you. I tend to kind of sound off on Twitter. It's like it's like you have to be super defensive to keep people from attacking you and putting you down or whatever. But now I want to go to the gym and tell these girls not to worry and that they're not hot enough for someone to want. These girls need an ego check. Yes, I'm inclined to agree. I don't think you need to do that. I don't think there's really any need to be mean. But I will say that if you see something like what happened with this girl happening in real time, even though I feel like nobody who was at the gym at the time probably knew that that was what she was doing. They probably had no way of knowing that this was how she was going to respond. But if you see a girl acting like an influencer in the wild, I feel like you owe it to her to tell her that she is doing the wrong thing. She needs to reconsider her actions. But at the same time, I feel like if you try to speak common sense to someone who lacks the underlying philosophical pillars, you're gonna have a hard time, because I don't even know where to begin. That's a problem. That's actually how I found Timcast. I haven't really watched since she left. I still like Pop Culture Crisis, though. Oh, I'm sorry. Pop Culture Crisis is great. Timcast IRL is doing good stuff, too. Like tonight, they're having Steven Crowder on. It's going to be a really good show. Yeah, your super chats are working now. I'm glad to hear that. I don't see your super chat now. Wait, do I see it? Yeah, no, there's from Chris Bertman and then Poofy. Nope, sorry. Pop Culture Crisis is great. I agree. I'm guessing you got demonized. I have not been demonetized. I'm assuming you don't actually mean demonized. I have not been demonetized on YouTube yet, even though I say exactly what I think all the time. I really recommend saying exactly what you think and what you believe all the time. That's the only way to operate as far as I'm concerned. All right, you guys, it's 7:15. We've gone over by 15 minutes. We're going to start wrapping. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I will continue to say it as long as I say it. How's it going?